right. Welcome back to the How to Relate podcast.
Hello. Thank you for having me. Round two.
Of course. Thank you, Jaclyn, for coming again. We recorded a whole podcast that did not have audio to it. So this is round two.
I just figured that was like my practice, easing me into the space. It was so kind of you to do that.
Totally. That was a scrimmage, although it was a really damn good scrimmage. So.
I know. I was like, oh, can I duplicate all the good things that came out of my brain?
Yes. So we're talking about dating.
Yes.
That is our topic. And we are therapists in dating.
Yes. Which I feel like can come with some good things, but also some not so good things sometimes.
Yeah. What do you experience as the good, the bad, the ugly, the highs, lows, all of it?
Yes. I feel like for the goods, I think even just like throughout working and getting more experience, I think listening to people talk and like kind of share their perspective, I think I've really started to pay more attention when I'm on dates or talking to people. Honestly, even not even on dates, just sometimes even in friendships. But since we're doing dating, you start to really listen to what they're saying and I think try and make meaning of it. And I think sometimes that can be really good because it helps you maybe catch things that you're like, ooh, how do I feel about that? Or like, let's take note of that. Maybe sometimes I might give maybe more meaning to things where it might be like, okay, am I jumping the gun a little? I just met them. So I think like that's some of the good stuff. I think some of the not so great stuff is, and you and I have talked about this before, of like people being like, oh, you're a therapist. Like, you know, like, oh, what are you reading for me right now? Or my biggest pet peeve is in relationships when people are like, well, you're a therapist. Like, you should be better at communication, or like basically like you should be able to regulate yourself perfectly. You should have the answer to everything. I feel like those are my big ones.
Yeah.
Can you relate to any of that?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I do agree with you. I think that given what we do, we are given the opportunities to practice leaning into curiosity on a regular basis. And because we hear all sides of humanity. And so I think that because we do practice meeting people with curiosity and compassion regularly, that we do translate that into our personal relationships, which is a nice skill to have. And then, like you'd mentioned, analyzing somebody. And sometimes it does feel like what I like to call the therapist long division, but going like, oh, I just like long divisioned you and I got like 3 remainder 5 as the answer to what your problems are and how this could go for you. But I'm not going to tell you that because this is a date and not a session.
This is not my job.
Yes. So, yeah. Yeah. So those are some of the things that, and in terms of, I'll say pickup lines if you're on the apps of things like, can I make an appointment with you? Are you even diagnosing me right now? Like, oh, so, you know, what, you're a therapist, are you going to analyze me? And like all of those questions just make me cringe.
Oh, yeah. You must get more though. I don't know why I don't, but I like sometimes I get them more in person, but not as like the pickup line. I'm so happy I don't.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Because it would be an immediate ick.
It is. It totally is.
Like, I feel like they think they're being smooth, like, oh, this was a good opener, but I don't know why it's not.
I'm just like, no. Like, because I also am like, have you been to therapy? Like, have you done this?
Yeah. Have you ever experienced, actually, on the flip side of that, sometimes I never know how to take it. So like again, I have to get to know the person more, but sometimes I feel like that's also used more on the flip side, not as much for women, but more for men, as almost sometimes I feel like a little buy-in of like, oh, I've done the work, when they're like, they'll like casually drop that they've done therapy. And sometimes I think it can be healthy, like them. Yeah. Like, oh yeah, I've been to therapy. Like I've done some of that stuff. And then sometimes I feel like it's almost the equivalent of bringing a cute puppy to the party. Sometimes I low-key feel like they use that as like, oh yeah, like I've been to therapy. Like, you know what I mean?
It's a hook.
Yeah.
I'm trying to like hook you in. Yeah. But just because people go to therapy doesn't mean that they're doing the work.
Right.
And a few months ago, there was a guy who met on the app who told me he was going to therapy, and he said that he was going once a month, mainly for work stress. And in my mind, I was like, okay, that's nice, but like, that's not like, to me, that was like, okay, so you're kind of saying this so you can like relate, basically, but you're not saying this in terms of like what I'm hearing you say is not, I'm doing the work.
Yeah.
myself.
You're just doing like some check-ins,
Yeah.
some good maintenance once a month.
Yeah, it was the way, and I think also the interaction was like the way it came across was very much like, there's nothing really wrong with me. I just have work stress and this is how I'm doing it. And
Yeah.
that was kind of this statement that was like, doing it. I know what you do. Moving on.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's funny. Yeah. Well, I've had, a couple people that have definitely dropped that in the beginning. And sometimes I think it's just to be able to relate. And so, which is fine. And I appreciate. And again, like, okay, cool. You've experienced it. Or like, again, you're open to that, which I think can be a really great thing. But yeah, I like how you word that of like, I do think it can be used as a little bit of a hook. Or in my opinion, I think this gets into like a messy area with therapy is obviously it's just our perspective of like what's happening and what our therapist is hearing and like helping us reflect. But that's, what is it? Like there's 3 truths to every side or whatever that saying is. And so sometimes I feel like that can show up interesting in that because it's like, oh, well, my therapist said this. And it's like, well, we're not like the all arching like God of the world and advice. So like we're that sounding board that like, here's maybe some things, but it's really what you're portraying to us too. And so sometimes I feel like it's like we can make that fit the narrative we want to hear.
Yes.
And I know one of my girlfriends experienced that years ago with dating where it was like, oh, well, my therapist told me to find someone who has similar interests. And she experienced it then with dating that person. It was like, no, you're taking that information and you're making it into, I need to find the exact replica of me. Like we need everything to be the same. Like you need to like only enjoy the things that I do. And she's like, okay, I feel like we're missing the point somehow.
Yeah, because there's so much room for nuance in all.
Yes.
Like you're saying, like one statement of general dating advice is find someone with similar interests. Maybe we probably tell clients all the time.
Yeah.
I do of like go to the kickball league if that's what you're into or whatever it might be. Find those people, but to take it and go with like this must mean that this is the way and it must be done. It cannot be another way. Because I think that people want to feel like they're doing things right, that they're doing things in what's best for themselves. When it's like, okay, this is the advice that I was given, this is how I'm going to take it, and I want to make sure almost like that I'm doing it right and I'm doing it well.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would agree, which is a weird, I feel like sometimes layer of people trying to please their therapist sometimes. Not that I think that was happening with that guy for her, but yes. But I think that goes into a lot of, again, like trying to find that balance of like, I want to connect with someone and you have to have obviously some things that you share together, but also like it's okay to have enough things that are different too and trying to find that balance of what that looks like.
Yeah. Well, okay. So this is going to lead into, this is a good segue for a topic that we wanted to cover, which is how to balance out differences in dating. So what have you, if you have experiences in
I'm sure plenty.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on like managing the differences? I say managing, but like
navigating
them. The people come, I think that sometimes people come in with sort of maybe a checklist. And when people aren't matching all the things on a checklist, it's like, okay, then how is there enough here to then say that we want to move forward in a relationship or to continue to date versus what are some like the differences that might show up?
Yeah. Oh, that's so tough. Yes, I've definitely experienced a lot of that. And I think still trying to kind of navigate some of that in dating. Yeah. I mean, I think it's hard because there's no obviously perfect framework to that. And I think again, with the checklist, it's like, I always encourage people like to work on identifying your needs and like, what are priorities or what are your non-negotiables, right? In a relationship and not again, trying to make it too checklisty. But I think with that, it's always looking at too, like, what am I willing to sacrifice in that kind of those needs, or is there wiggle room in some of these? And I found for myself, a lot of times I'll let things go. Like I can make that work to make it work in the short term. And then I'm the classic, like, then I build that resentment on the back end. Like, a couple months down the road, it's like, okay, this is not working. You're not doing any of these things. And it's like, well, yeah, Jaclyn, because you were okay with that. So you can't be mad at them for all of a sudden not being that person.
Yeah, I'm trying to make it work then just ends up making it work.
Right.
And the person who's negotiating their needs is going to be the one who, of course, like builds those resentments because either I was okay with it in the beginning and I tried to make it okay for myself, but I wasn't having that and be met. But now I'm really feeling the deficit maybe in a lot of areas. And I'm looking to you to try and help change that and grow and feel that with me.
Yes. I think it can be really easy, and I have this conversation with a lot of clients and myself, is, and I know people talk about this all the time, but I think is struggling with seeing the potential in someone. And I definitely get myself roped into that problem because I think, again, a lot of our work, I don't know if you experience this, but I see the best in people a lot. Or like, again, it's like, listen, client wise, like, here are the things like we can get you to where you want to be to like, again, kind of really, really live the life that you want and be that authentic self. And so I think I see that in a lot of people, but I'm like, you got to stop doing that. Like, again, you have to take people for face value. Again, like looking at what are they doing for me right now? Is this, again, aligning with what I need and what that looks like? Because otherwise, I think, again, you can get yourself into that trap where then down the road, you're like, well, how did we get here?
Absolutely. Because what works really well in our job and with our clients doesn't always work really well in the dating part of it.
Yes.
Yes. I love the saying that when someone shows you who they are, believe them.
Oh, yes. I'm like obsessed with Mel Robbins' Let Them, which I feel like is kind of like a little bit trendy saying right now, but I feel like very similar where it's like, just like take people for face value, like take their word when they say it. It also makes me think of the phrase where it's like, I forget what it's said exactly, but it's like if someone tells you that like they're not gonna be able to give you what they need, or like, like I'm not enough for you, or whatever, it's like take that and run with it. Like they are quite literally telling you, I can't give you what you need.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times we're like, no, you're fine. It's okay. I love you. Like we'll make it work.
Yeah. Yeah. Because that to me also sounds similar from someone who would say, I'm not ready for a relationship. And someone hoping maybe I can be that person and maybe eventually you will be, or what does that then mean for me? And it is the believing when they say it, and also that it is painful for the person to hear it because it's a loss. It's a loss of whatever that relationship is. It's a loss of the fantasy of what could be. It's a loss of the time spent together, depending how long it's been, and especially if the longer it is, of course. So a lot of times, the heartbreak can be there. So yeah.
I know. I think it's really hard when you really like the person and again, you're really connected, and if they were in the right place, it would work, maybe it would kind of work out. But if they're not, it's like you can't, again, make someone be ready. And so I think that is really tough to let go of like, you're not in that place. I am. So we are having that discord, but there's nothing like outside of that outwardly actually wrong. It's just we're in different places.
Yeah.
Which I feel like there's always like kind of those cheesy sayings that it's like, oh, if it's the right person, like the right person would be ready for you. Or like, if it's your person, it'll circle back and you guys will. I feel like there's so many like kitschy sayings about that.
So something we talked about round one was the saying, if they wanted to, they would. And wondering what your thoughts are around that phrase.
That's such a loaded one. I think originally when I first heard it, was like, yeah, girl power. Like if they wanted to, they would. I think it came maybe from a decent place, but then I feel like it turned into a really bad place. So now I'm not a big fan of it because I think there's so much else going on. And I think a lot of it then is giving the power to that person that's like kind of not doing the thing you want, of like, oh yeah, if they really liked you, like it's a you problem. Like you're doing something wrong. So if they liked you enough, they would be doing it. I don't think that's the case at all. I think it's like trying to take back the power for the person on the other end of like, it doesn't really matter if they wanted to, they would. It's like, if they're not doing it, again, it's not aligning with what I want. So like, I want to find someone that does want to do those things for me. Cause again, to me, that's looking for somebody that's compatible with you.
Yes. Because there is a difference between finding someone who's compatible versus wanting to write the script for how someone should act and be in your relationship.
Yes.
And if you're trying to direct someone's actions and behaviors and what they say, that's going to lead down a pretty dark path.
Yes.
Because it's a setup for disappointment, for like, I'm not getting my needs met, but also a lot of hurt for the other person too, because they're going to be hearing the message, I'm not enough, and whatever I do isn't enough, and why can't I please you? Yeah.
Yes, no, I totally agree. And this actually makes me think of a topic. So actually, I want to see what your thoughts are on this. That comes up a lot in my sessions, is kind of this concept of like control and like expressing what you want. Like are you trying to be controlling by telling someone like what you want versus like needs and setting expectations and kind of finding that balance of being like, well, I want to ask for what I need. And if they're not doing that, do I just walk away? Or again, or does it come off as controlling? Like, I need you to do these things for me. Does that make sense? I'm trying to figure out like
It
that
does.
kind of,
It does. Yeah. Like what is,
what's healthy to ask for versus
ask for? Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to use, I don't love the love languages.
okay, same.
Yeah. So, because I think that actually can be a good example as to what this is, right? So,
Okay.
I think that we try and pigeonhole our needs and our wants, and we say, okay, like, let's use the love language as an example.
Yeah.
If mine is acts of service and quality time, and you're not doing that, then you're not telling me that you love me. But if the other person is, maybe they're like, they come home and they give you flowers, or maybe they come home and they like cook dinner for you, or whatever it might be, that might be different from your expectations.
Right.
It's also like, can you also look and say that is them showing you love?
Right. That's them showing up.
Yeah. Because I also think then there's the personal work of recognizing when I'm not going to meet the other person's expectations.
Sure.
And going to disappoint them. I think that we don't talk about how disappointment is built into relationships and how to deal with that both on a personal level and on the relational level.
Yeah.
So it is the and both. But when we're talking about, I think, dating and getting in touch with needs and wants, I think of needs as like your oxygen, your food, your sleep. These are your basics.
Yeah.
And then your wants are like, and then what would be the nice to have? Like for me to be in a relationship with someone, I definitely need them. I need XYZ. For all these other things, we can talk about them and we can grow in that together, hopefully. And we can deal with the differences along the way.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great way of looking at it and kind of, again, flipping it back on, because I think a lot of times it's always so focused on like, my partner's not giving me this, or they're not doing that. And I saw when all this, if he wanted to, he would, when all that was coming out, I saw a couple people do some response videos to that. Like, yeah, my husband's never going to come home with 200 roses and chocolates and all these like super, I feel like, again, kind of like really idealized romantic things. But they were like, like my husband will go change my oil, start the car for me when it's cold, like do all these other gestures. And they're like, that is their love language. And to me, like, I'm okay with that. So I think it's kind of that weird, delicate balance of how much of it is like what we're taught we're supposed to kind of want, or what this perfect romantic version of someone's going to be versus like, how does that actually translate in real life? Like, would you rather have the roses and flowers, or would you rather have someone doing some of these maybe more realistic, I guess. I don't know what I would exactly call them, but
I call them just less sexy. Like a day-to-day, the day-to-day life things. Yeah.
So, again, I feel like sometimes it's like, I think again, that goes into like, there's no quote unquote perfect person, but again, we don't want to encourage people to again, kind of like settle or lower their expectations or what they need in a relationship. But I feel like sometimes it's like trying to balance, like, what does that look like? And how does that really show up for me? So I don't know.
Yeah. I think it's also kind of recognizing am I more the fluid person or am I more of a rigid person? And if we're kind of looking at this as like a spectrum, if I'm a more fluid person, I might be more willing to negotiate my wants and needs. However, then it's also recognizing when I am abandoning them and saying that they don't matter.
Yes.
The other side of it being too rigid is I'm very in touch with my wants and needs and will absolutely like maybe say them, but I can't deviate from them.
Right.
And if I can't deviate from them, it's going to be really hard to collaborate relationally with somebody. So I think that if there's like a pattern or dynamic where maybe some people get caught in these, like, I'm a very fluid person, going after maybe someone who's very rigid, and they get caught in this cycle again and again, my needs aren't being met.
Right.
It's getting in touch with, what is the pattern doing for you?
Yes.
And why is this keeping you, let's say, perceivingly safe?
Sure. Yeah. No, I think that makes complete sense. I feel like that's something I've tried to really work on. I think it's always a work in progress because I think every new person you date always brings out different things. And so it's like you're like constantly being tested.
Yeah.
But something that my therapist had said to me a long time ago, which I really was like, oh, that's a really good reframe, is the goal isn't maybe necessarily like, oh, you're just going to have it figured out and like you're going to do it perfectly with someone. The goal is to catch yourself doing the stuff faster. So she's like, you might have maybe stayed in a relationship for 3 years and you were letting all of your stuff run wild. And now it maybe took you 6 months. Now it's taking you 3 months to catch those things. So like, I think the goal is to just get faster and faster. The goal isn't like, I'm just never going to do this. Fix the problem.
Right.
Because I think sometimes that's what people want.
Yeah.
Like, help me never get hurt again. Help me fix this.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like that as a now that I have the awareness, I can act on it faster.
Yes.
Now that I know what to even look for, I can see that it's there, and the pain points, I can actually feel them and express them.
Yes. Yeah. Because I think a lot of times, again, I get it. People don't want to get hurt. They want to like fix the problem. We don't want to repeat our mistakes. Totally get that. But I feel like it's not realistic because it's not math. It's not ABC. We're fixing this problem. This is what it is. I'm like, everybody comes with so many different things and different angles and, pushes on different buttons in different relationships that I'm like, there's really in my way, no way to guarantee that.
Yeah.
Which I love having that conversation with people. Brene Brown, which I know you also love. I love how she talks about essentially like you can either keep yourself in like an emotional safety bubble and never get hurt, but that means you're never really going to open yourself up to like any other really like feel good emotions. You're just like always going to be safeguarded. And I always tell that to people like you can either not be vulnerable and stick in that, but then you have to be knowing that you're like willingly signing up for that. So if you want to experience love and happiness, you have to be okay with experiencing the flip side of that because they usually come together. And so kind of giving people like, here are your options. What are you willing to do? And then I think when people see it in that lens, they're like, I have to be okay with like hurt and loss and grief to be open to then experiencing like more love and happiness because with one can't come the other kind of mentality.
Yeah. And to me, that's the definition of what you're saying, I think is the definition of emotional availability.
Okay.
Because I'm hearing you say this, and before we started this question that was coming up around like, what is being emotionally available? Like, what does that even mean? And I think it is being open to experience the highs and lows relationally.
Yes.
And being able to also say it and be, as Brene Brown would say, in the arena and doing the brave thing and taking the risk because there will be times of pain and heartbreak, and there's going to be times of love and joy.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. I think I totally agree with that. And I think a big thing that I talk about with people, because I think, again, that's scary, which I'm like, yeah, absolutely, is we talk about kind of be emotionally available. I think a lot of people, the trendy word is like being secure within yourself is, I don't know who I stole this from. I can't remember, but they talked about, I like the analogy of like building a home within yourself. And I think that allows you to be emotionally available because you recognize like, yeah, I might get my feelings hurt or this might not go how I want or, whatever the case, but I've built a strong base within myself so that even if those things do happen, I have myself to stand on versus if you build a home within someone else, yeah, if they leave, that's going to be not so great.
Absolutely. Yeah. I like that. I like that analogy a lot. Yeah. To have a secure base to then be able to connect with somebody.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because we always talk about, you can never guarantee that someone's going to hurt you. I always tell my clients, like, I can't even guarantee that I'm not going to hurt you, right? Like, I'm like, I might say something that is going to offend you and I don't know it, or, whatever that takes the wrong way, whatever. So I'm like, you can never have any guarantees of those things from other people. You can only ever guarantee yourself. So again, like building up that connection and, safety and support within your own self so that you do feel available to go out and get your heart broken.
Yeah. And bounce back with resilience and come back
for more.
Oh man. Yeah. Yeah. I like that a lot.
Do you have any more things that you feel like, I mean, we're talking about kind of emotional availability, which I feel like, again, is a very buzzword right now in dating. Any other, kind of additions to what you feel like it is or what it looks like or doesn't look like, I guess?
That's an interesting thing. I was actually in therapy yesterday, kind of having this conversation because what it looks like in practice, I think can also feel like, okay, I have the script and the movie in my mind as to what it could look like. But then I'm like, what about when you take it into reality? What about when you take it when you're on a first date? How does this happen? Like, how does this start? Like, where does this go? So I think that it's something to say like, yes, we do have like building it within ourselves first to then also be open and curious about the other person, where they are and like how vulnerable they can be or what they're like how the conversations go and share. Cause again, vulnerability, if Brene calls it like it's risk emotional exposure, and something else.
And that other word.
And that other word that will come to me. But it is taking the risk. It will require emotional exposure. And when I think of dating, those two things are going hand in hand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I would agree. And I think it is tough because I don't think there's like a right or wrong for I think again everything we're talking about, it's always that gray space, right? Like it's not like you can meet someone and be like, oh, they're emotionally available immediately, right? Like I think you have to get to know someone and you get to really kind of navigate what that looks like, because some people are, I think, are more open to being open, and you've got again the spectrum. Some people are like trauma jumping right away, then you've got some people that don't want to really open up and it takes them a long time, and trying to really navigate like, okay, does this match for me just in general? Because I'm sure really emotional availability versus unavailability, I bet could differ between person to person too if you ask them.
Absolutely.
You know, like
Oh,
we say this word like
sure.
this is what it means, but in my opinion, you ask 20 different people and they're all going to give you like a different answer or be like, oh, that person was or that person wasn't.
Absolutely. 100%. Yeah. Yeah. I like in, okay, so attachment styles. Okay. Which if you're listening and haven't read the book Attached, highly recommend.
Yes. Wonderful.
Great book. So, okay. I find myself on when I would consider myself secure mostly. However, on my insecure parts, I lean way more avoidant. I am more of the shutdown. I am more of the withdrawer. I will pull away. That's more of my strategy whenever I feel like insecure in a relationship. And I've met people whose styles are definitely way more anxious.
Yep. I am one of them.
Okay. So like in dating, when I felt someone be way more anxious, my strategy was to pull away. My strategy, like it was like, because normally I feel like I can be pretty secure, but I would notice it if someone came on maybe like as like a little bit more pursuing, a little bit more anxious, showing up as like a little bit more like I feel like I need a relationship, and that's where I would shut down.
Yes. No, I can completely relate to that because I experienced kind of the flip side of it, I feel like.
Okay.
Which is always interesting because then in a sense, is it like, is that them, you know, I don't want to say bringing out the worst in us, but, you know, again, bringing out maybe your unhealthy parts. So then I think then it's hard to be like, okay, is this person, for lack of better words, like not good for me because this is what it's bringing out? Or is this something I need to work on?
I think it's both because I think, I think that the person bringing that out in us gives us information as to what our blind spots could be.
That's fair. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and that it also might be a sign that that might not be the relationship because I just think of it, if two people are so activated in that way, the idea that feeling like that you can even like regulate enough to be together may feel like a bit of a stretch, but I do think that it is like a bit of a, all right, this is giving me the information to say what I need to work on. Yes, exactly.
That's true. Which I think again is so hard because it's like kind of similar to what we're talking about, like how far do I stretch my needs, right? Like, because again, I think everybody gets activated by different things. That's so normal. Even if you're secure, right? Like everybody's going to have those moments that stuff comes up. And so I think it's so hard to, again, navigate like, okay, is this person, I don't say secure enough, but, you know, like stable enough, secure enough, can work through their stuff that like, okay, we can work through this, or I can work through this on my end, you know, whatever that looks like. Or like what you said, if it's like, ooh, I think this might be too much, where like we're just on two different ends, or again, we're doing that push and pull part of the relationship that usually doesn't turn out very well, I feel like.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that push and pull can feel like a lot for some people. For others though, I think that push and pull feels like chemistry.
Yes. Oh, I'm sure the chase.
Oh yeah, the chase and like the uncertainty of it. Will it ever? Like the question marks with it. Yeah, I think that can feel like chemistry.
I think so too. I talk about this a lot of times with some of my people, and we always kind of talk about it can be fun until it isn't. Like, I think for a lot of people, it wears its course. Like, oh, it's fun. It's chemistry in the beginning. And then after a while, it's like, okay, what are we doing? What's the point? Where is this going? How did we get into a situationship?
Yeah.
So I think as you get a little bit older, I think like when you're like mid or young 20s, it can be a little bit, you can maintain it a little bit longer and it's fun. But I think as I've definitely seen, I feel like myself and clientele wise, as we all start to get a little older, it's like, Yeah, I don't know if that's like as fun anymore.
Yeah, yeah. I think that people do want a little bit more of like a homeostasis
Hmm.
in life when you're young and maybe in your 20s. It's a bit more exciting and you're figuring out life in general. So
Yeah.
then the dating aspect can feel like, okay, well, we're just figuring this out.
Yeah.
Whereas when you are in your 30s, and you and I are both 32, that it does feel more like I want to feel settled in a way that feels secure and also want someone to collaborate and feel that with me.
Yes. Yeah. What I think too, because it's kind of like, I'm gonna say that stakes are higher, but like what you said, when you're younger, you're just kind of doing whatever. And I think that's great. It's a great time in life. And then as you get
Yeah.
older, you're like, okay, I would say, a lot of people, it's like, okay, yeah, I'm wanting to settle down, kind of hear maybe my goals. I've really identified. I've really gotten a good groove. I've got good friendships. And then it's like, I think it's beautiful when you get to a place where you're like, I don't want this disrupting my peace.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, no, thank you.
It can be a very freeing and empowering place to be.
Hmm.
Because it, like you mentioned earlier, you start to recognize it faster.
Yeah.
And also you know what you want, and
Yeah.
that is powerful too.
Yes. I still love the thing that you always say, what's the merger? I love that.
Oh yeah.
I never remember,
Yeah, like
right?
when you're in your 20s, the relationships can feel more like a startup. And when you start
Yes.
to get older and be more established, it can feel more like a merger.
Hmm. Which I think is always so funny because to me that goes back to a lot of what we were talking about earlier of just again like trying to when each person is in more the merger stage where it's like okay I've kind of got my stuff you have your stuff we are maybe a little less flexible because it's like this is kind of what I really need. I saw a really good like whatever quote or something that was like in dating when you're kind of again checking in with yourself, is this person meeting my needs, all this stuff, is it are they a good person for me, whatever, is it was like do you feel like they're adding not just adding value because obviously but like adding to like your routine, your goals, like are they pushing you in good ways or pulling you in ways that don't align with what you are currently doing?
Mhm.
And sometimes I'm like, that's I think a really good check-in for people. Like, am I still going to the gym? Am I staying up a lot later now? Am I eating out more? Like kind of really checking in with, I guess in a sense, those are almost lifestyle descriptions, but just
Yeah.
again, is this really aligning with how I was living? And are they coming in nicely and merging well with me? Or is this like a not so great business decision?
Yeah. Yeah. Is this disrupting the business?
Yeah. Is this messing with the bookwork I worked hard
Yeah.
to turn in for taxes this year?
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think about the compatibility piece and maybe
Hmm.
also being a bit more appealing as we also get older
Yes.
because we do want typically we want someone who can like again merge within our lives where
Hmm.
it doesn't feel like that there's too much of disruption.
Yeah.
And when you're just figuring out what that even looks like, it's fun and exciting, and then you both can do it together.
Hmm.
Whereas when you're both doing it independently, it's like now I'm looking for someone who also has
Yes.
these qualities or does these things or shows up in this way. Yeah.
Hmm. When I think something too, I don't know if you've faced this, and I think this is a really hard there's no answer to it. So I think it's really hard. So I'd be curious actually what your thoughts are is I think again, the compatibility piece can start to feel sometimes again, I feel like mundane for people, or, we hear their words a lot of times like, oh, we feel like roommates again, like and, I think it's hard because then I think for a lot of people, it's like, are we just being comfortable? Again, am I settling for my needs? Or is this just, again, kind of long-term relationships? This is safe and healthy and like in a good way, right? Like, I think that brings up a lot of stuff for people. And I've had someone who has approached some of that and has really struggled with like sexual chemistry. Cause, it's like when you're first dating, it's like fireworks, I feel like for most people. And, I feel like that's a natural, you kind of find your pace. But then I think for some people, it's like, does that mean something's wrong? Does that mean we're not as interested in each other when some of that stuff starts to kind of settle in?
Yeah. Yeah. I, so like in working with couples, I typically prescribe novelty. Like, I
Okay.
mean, you have to build in novelty. And
Mm-hmm.
especially with people with kids, it's going to be a planned thing. It's going to be a planned date
Mm-hmm.
night. It's not going to be as spontaneous as it once was.
Yeah.
However, that doesn't make it less meaningful. It just means that you're actually scheduling it and incorporating it with how life is.
Okay.
So when people
That's fair.
talk about things like scheduled sex, I mean, I have varying opinions on it. I think I
Mm-hmm.
don't have like a strong stance one way or another on that. But I think that what people are saying is make it a priority in your life.
Mm-hmm.
So much so that you're willing to set aside time to be intimate with one another.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And, and you and I worked in addiction. We worked together,
Yep.
which was so fun. But you know how the saying is like the first high is like the best.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I kind of almost think in relationships that sexual chemistry, it's when it's so high in the beginning, it's going to dip. Like you're not going to experience the high the same.
It's not your first
It's
kiss.
not the first kiss. It's not the first time.
That's fair.
And it may dip a little bit, but that dip isn't necessarily a sign that something's wrong.
Right.
It's more of a sign that you are now getting more comfortable with one another. And there's other maybe exciting parts of life that you're then doing together where it doesn't just depend on that sexual initiation and chemistry.
Yeah, I like that. That's, I think, probably a really, because I use that analogy all the time with people with addiction typically, but I've never thought to use that with like intimacy. That's a really, actually, I'm going to steal that from you today.
Of course.
Stolen from Brittany. Yeah. But no, I think that's very fair because I think it is hard, right? Like all newness kind of like wears out after some point. But again, then I think it transitions into, again, healthy comfort. But I think, again, it's like trying to adjust to, we can be used to the highs and lows. And so it's like, I think, again, we're chasing kind of that feeling. And then it's like, oh no, this is what safety is supposed to feel like.
Yeah.
But sometimes that can feel boring.
Exactly. We're constantly calibrating our needs for security and our needs for adventure and freedom.
Ooh.
So if we're calibrating our needs for security, when you're in the start of a relationship, it's all freedom, right? When if you think of it in terms of like just on a spectrum, right. It is all uncertainty. It's all adventure. It's all fun because there's so much uncertainty there. And then when you start to get to know each other and then start to build into the relationship, security starts to build. And then that secure base can also be then a launching pad for other like more adventurous things. But you are going to experience maybe some sort of like mundane day-to-day things. Like my sister just had a baby. Her life is revolving around when does he need to eat, sleep, nap, like just like all the things, right? So like yeah, like that there is going to be, as life goes on and, you know, stages change, that there's going to be a sense of like, we have a schedule now that, and maybe children and other things that have demands. And then I think about creative couples. What's a fun date night in? How can we get creative with one another? How can we do things just a little bit differently so that we don't get bored? And like add some playfulness into it.
I think for a lot of people, it's like they have to kind of boost back up in a sense, like their intentionality. Is that a word? Yeah. Intentionality in their relationship. Like when they get to kind of that roommate feeling. I think a lot of times it's like, okay, well, how much energy and effort are we putting into our relationship right now? Or are we just going with motion status quo?
Right.
And how, to me, that's so applicable to like every aspect of life. So it's like, can be so interchangeable of like, it's no different than if you've, you know, are feeling like you're not taking care of your body or what you're putting in your body or you just like all the things. Yeah.
Like at work, we don't go to work and just expect to get a raise just by giving 40% of ourselves each and every day. Right. So it's kind of like, why not look at relationships and thinking about how can I be 100% here when I'm here so that I can be 100% at work when I'm at work, but kind of translating that same kind of mindset home. Because I think a lot of times I give 100% to my work and other things in my life. And then the scraps come home. And at the end of the day, I just want to kick off my shoes and watch Netflix, there's nothing wrong with that. However, then if that keeps happening, it's recognizing what those repercussions are.
Like what does that mean in the long term?
Exactly. Like the day in, day out starts to add up.
When I think it's really hard when you, with that, and then when you add in when people are like, I don't have the capacity or energy to give more, like that is the reality right now. And then I think for a lot of people, it's like, okay, well, again, is that enough for me? Is this sustainable? Do we have enough of a relationship built that we will ride this out? Like, then you start getting into really messy stuff.
Really messy things. I like to say you need to diversify your portfolio of energy. So if someone's saying that they don't have enough energy, I'm going, so what do you do for yourself? Okay. What are your days looking like and what's coming home? Because if it's going, I work so hard at my job and I'm depleted, and if I'm working late nights or whatever it might be, right? Then it's like, okay, can you reallocate that? Like it's like then I'm looking at that and going like, okay, you just put all of your investment into this one thing. Can you diversify that investment?
Would you almost say, are we kind of describing like, can you adjust your priorities?
Yes.
Okay. Cause that's what I heard.
Yeah.
And I have had Circle us back to everything we were talking about earlier. I feel like I've had that come up a lot because I love to date workaholics. And so I feel like that comes up a lot of like prioritizing work, which I totally get. And like, I get it. You want to be successful, like driven, all great things, but also in the same token, can you prioritize other things in your life? And I feel like a lot of times the answer kind of is no.
Mhm.
And then that comes back to me having to let go of those of like, we might have, again, great chemistry, but if we're not connected in a place where you're not willing to prioritize the relationship a little bit more,
Mhm.
I feel like that has came up for me a lot then, where it's like they're not willing to divest energy in other areas.
Right. Right. Yeah. Which interesting because I think for men, that has been the narrative that's been bestowed on them as to how they need to be.
Yeah.
Is you need to work hard, you need to be a writer, you need to
Yep.
be independent.
I know.
There's like the James Bond characters, the Lone Ranger, like it just is you do it alone and you keep hustling and that's the way it is. But I think that, and now there's a lot of women who are dating men and going, where are all the men? Where are like what's happening? Why isn't anybody available? What's going on here? And I think that we left men out of the conversation and now they're saying, can you be more vulnerable? And they're like, what do you mean? Like,
Yeah. What?
like we just, yeah. So I think that it's been praised to be workaholics.
Yeah.
And I think that for women too. I think that both, like everyone's been like kind of like the achieve and work hard have been the cornerstone of this country's mottos for so long.
I don't like it here.
Yeah, we've taken that and ran with it, and we did really, really well at it. Now, we maybe think about other ways to be that might start letting go of old patterns.
Yeah, which I have found for myself, that's not my job to teach someone else.
Yeah.
And so letting go of that, like that's their journey and I can't be mad at them for not wanting to do those things for me.
It's so hard.
I know. I want to fix them because I'm right.
Yeah. So if you're looking for a therapist, Jaclyn,
I'm your girl.
Jaclyn is it.
Yeah.
It is a tough one. I know. Especially because again, kind of separating the line of like what we do versus how we date. It's like, and what we do, we work with people who struggle with these issues and we are patient with them and we work with them. And then in dating, it's like I do this on a regular basis and have these conversations. And I can show you the way. However, I'm trying to be your girlfriend.
That's not me. I know. That one I think is a tough one. I think again, it's so natural to fall into that. Like, oh, I'm hearing you tell me about a problem. Let's look at that a little bit more.
So have you identified what are the underlying needs and emotions that are underneath this problem?
Our poor future husbands. I'm always baffled when therapists marry therapists.
Really?
Yeah, that is so fascinating. I'm like, the amount of stuff going on in that.
Oh my God.
I can't imagine.
What do you think? Do you think it'd be easier or harder? Wait, what do you think would be the unique elements to that?
Maybe I like having the upper hand. Oh my God, is this like an ego thing? Like, I'm like, I was like thinking about that. Like, why? I feel like there'd be just like so much reflecting and everybody using skills on each other that I'd be like, quit trying to CBT me on this. I feel like I wouldn't like that. I don't know. I don't know why that's such a weird concept to me.
And it's so funny because like I'll call them like the famous therapists. Gottman.
Oh yeah, married.
Yeah, Gottmans are married. Esther Perel and her husband, they're both therapists. I mean, Brene, her husband is a doctor, so I mean, not the same, but helping profession, healthcare.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think who else. Oh, the Hendricks, like Harvell and Helen Hendrick.
Maybe I need to stop writing this off.
I mean, there could be something to it, but I think you're right. I think that there is so much emotional attunement that everyone has been trained to do.
I know. I guess I think I would, which this is probably not the case, but I think I would feel like I'm like how people probably feel dating us.
Yeah.
You're dating a therapist. Like I'd be like, is this your therapist mode or are you just showing up as like a person for me right now?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is ironic because that's probably how people experience us.
Do you think,
possibly,
though, at some point, I say at some point, I think that for us, our skills stem from our qualities as people.
Yes, I would agree.
So I think that we learned our skills and we 10x them because it's what we do.
Yeah.
But I also think that we have unique qualities that have already been there and been in all of our relationships.
Yeah.
And then they'll show up.
True.
Yeah.
That's fair. Yeah, it's not like you're like they're not putting on a facade.
Yeah.
It's just like an extension of who I already am, I feel like.
Yes.
So that's fair. All right, so I'll give the therapist a chance. Although I don't think I've ever like came across one, to be honest. So
yeah, we are in a very female dominated
I was gonna
industry.
say it's so female dominated.
As women looking for men, this is
Well, at least we won't have the problem with like dating a coworker
Yeah.
situation.
No, that doesn't happen as often in our industry, I don't think. Oh man. Can we talk about the bid for attention versus bid for connection?
Yes.
Okay. How would you differentiate those two?
I would say it kind of actually reminds me a little bit of some of the emotional availability stuff. Not saying that that's always like the, tropes that it gets split into, but I feel like a lot of what people get really frustrated with now is a lot of the bid for attentions where it's the, hey, you up, or, just again, like these bid for attentions, but like there's no effort. You're secretly wondering like, how many people did you text this to? A lot of that versus I feel like, again, when you're looking for something serious and you're wanting someone who is intentional, that bid for connection is something that's meaningful. It's having that consistent communication, following up, effort, really, I guess, if you want to break it down. And I think people a lot of times don't understand what they're doing is most likely a bid for attention versus like, oh, I was reaching out to see how you're doing. And you're like, what? At 11 p.m.? Were you? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, no, I do agree with that. I think that there's the bid for attention, I think stems from I'm kind of interested, and want to keep this kind of around.
Yeah.
And maybe it'll go further, maybe not. Like, I feel like
I want it as an option.
Right. I want it as an option versus bid for connection has a bit more intentional efforts to it.
Yes.
If someone is saying, I want to see you, I think that's a connection. Like, okay, if someone is saying, I want to see you and using those direct words, I would say that's a bid for connection.
Yeah.
Most of the time.
I feel like as long as there's more intention behind than the follow-up of like, let's orchestrate something versus just like, I want to see you.
Right, exactly. Like, yes, not like I want to see you because it is 11 p.m. at night and it's a Saturday and
yes,
yeah, exactly. But if it's more of like you're getting this sense of someone is maybe not sure or it could feel like a take it or leave it, then I think the bid for attention can almost be like, I want to grab it and make it connection. I want to change it. I want to be able to make it more than what is given to me, but we can't make cakes out of crumbs. So
yes,
there's that.
Yeah, it's like quit watering the breadcrumbs into a plant.
Yes.
I think my therapist said quit watering their words.
Oh, wow.
I know. It was a good one.
That's a good one.
She said she was like a master therapist to me. I loved her.
That's great.
But yeah, no, I would agree. I think, again, and I think in a sense, whether people are like aware of it or not, or kind of in denial a little bit, sometimes that can be you not acknowledging your needs. Because on the receiving end of that, if someone's doing a bid for attention, it's like, okay, well, how many times do you think of like women sitting together, we're just using women because we are women, but women sitting together and being like, what do you think this text means? Like, are they interested? Like, how do I respond? And I feel like those are good examples of most likely bids for attention versus if someone's being clear and, confident and upfront and making a, kind of a commitment or a plan to me, you can usually tell like that is for connection.
Yes.
Versus if it leaves you questioning and unsure.
If you have to ask the metaphorical brunch table what's happening.
If you have to send it in the group chat.
Yeah. Then
you have your answer.
Yeah. The answer is the question.
Yes.
Yes. Is even the nature of asking the question.
1000%. So this comes up a lot. And I have been trying to push my people not to be ghosters because I feel like at this age, like my clients, like, let's not ghost people. But if it's a bid for connection and you're not interested, I feel like you absolutely should respond and like let them know, hey, I'm not interested, something nice. But if it's a bid for attention, what are your thoughts? Is that something to respond to and be like, not interested? Is it something you just like, I'm not even going to address this? Like, what are your thoughts on that? Because I feel like that's a little bit more of like,
yeah, I've gotten the random hey out of nowhere
Yep.
after like months of not speaking. And
Right.
I went, I am not answering this. So,
Okay.
I mean, and is that ghosting? Maybe not, but I do
I don't think it's ghosting.
yeah. But I think that like, yeah, there are certain things that just don't require a response. It's like,
Yes.
especially if it's a, hey, what's up? What's going on? Something along those lines. It's kind of like, where are you trying to go with this? Like,
Yeah.
we've already been down this road before. Do I really want to go back down that path?
Yeah. Do I want to open this up for myself?
Yeah, 99.9% of the time, the answer is no.
Yeah. No, I would agree. One of my girlfriends, I always feel like they always come back from the graveyard. It's like the classic saying, which I do love. And I think it's like true a lot of times.
Oh, so true.
Unfortunately.
And listen, we are just past the holidays.
Yeah.
And
Oh, yeah.
This is the season where they show up.
She just had one circle back and we knew he was. Like, I was like, oh, yeah, that's for sure. And we were talking about, I was like, so are you going to respond? Or again, are you going to like let it go? And we were kind of like, do you want to be petty or like get the ego hit of like, I get the last word? Or is the last word you not saying anything? And then it's just like, you're not even important enough for me to respond to because again, this is so low effort. You're not looking for anything. And so I always think that's always a fun one to try to like navigate through, depending on the mood you're feeling that day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, am I going to let them know? Like, no, you did me dirty. Or like, I don't even care. I'm so uninterested.
Yeah, because I think that there is often two modes. And one is I want to hold someone accountable and let them know. And the other one being that is too exhausting, too much effort, and I need to let it go.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would agree. But I think those are both healthy responses.
Yeah.
Either I'm either going to respond or like,
right.
I'm going to let you know kind of like how this felt for me. But I would say most of the time it's like something petty or like an ego for a lot of people, the response.
Oh, yeah.
Like it's being driven for other reasons.
For sure.
How do you feel about this? Because I actually just had someone ask me this recently too when we were talking about it, is if someone's asking for feedback. And I know you and I have talked about this also, but or again, not even if they're not maybe necessarily asking for feedback, but even maybe in you telling them you're not interested for whatever reasons, because maybe again, they're not emotionally available or, whatever the case. How do you feel about that? Like how much of it is our role to let them know this didn't align? Or do you want to keep it simple of like, hey, wasn't a fit for me, wish you the best? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. So I had someone ask me this after our first date and I'll be completely honest, just didn't respond because I felt like this can go many ways.
This opens up windows.
This opens up windows. And so, but if you're going to be brave and a better person than me, then I think it could be like, okay, and let's put this also after a first date, I'm like, I just wasn't feeling a connection. So I said that in the beginning.
Yeah.
Hey, it's great meeting you. Wasn't feeling a connection. And he was like, thank you. Do you have any feedback for me for my own personal growth? And I'm like, it was after a first date. I don't know you all that well to be giving any sort of feedback.
Yeah.
However, I did feel like the date was like an interview. And that could have been feedback that I'd given this person.
Sure.
But on the flip side, I just was kind of thinking, this is a lot of effort for me to also put out there for that person too.
Yeah.
Like them asking for feedback. And this kind of was very metaphorical for how I felt was it felt like someone who was looking to fulfill the open position of a spouse.
Yeah.
And wanted to know how compatible I was for that position.
Sure.
And so there was some things that kind of felt sort of like an interview.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wasn't really feeling that connection. I think maybe because of some of those factors.
Yeah.
So when the follow-up was, I have feedback? It all just felt like, why didn't I get the job kind of thing.
You should Venmo request.
Yeah. I'm like, it's kind of like, why, like, why wasn't I a good candidate for the job kind of thing?
Yeah.
Kind of almost like, and so, well, I find it endearing and like people who want that and like are looking to grow.
Mm-hmm.
I think that can be nice and great. But on the flip side, I think for the other person, you're putting that person in a pretty sticky situation.
Yeah.
Like I don't think that anyone really wants to hurt somebody's feelings.
Right.
And after, or maybe someone doesn't really want to like kind of delve into, yeah, I did feel like that was an interview, and be open and blunt and not ask for something back of like, do you have feedback for me? Or like,
Yeah.
because
like,
right. Because I wouldn't really know if I wanted that at that point. So I just don't know on like a spectrum of like helpful versus hurting.
I know.
It's an interesting one.
No, I totally agree. I get really conflicted about that too, because sometimes I'm like, okay, is it helpful that they're asking, and like give them a moment of growth of like, well, here are some things, but also then it goes back to me is like, but what if somebody else wants that, right? Like, unless they were like outward, like if they were like really rude, or like if there was like outwardly things that nobody should be getting, like I think that's different, but I don't think they'd be asking, to be honest, and most likely, but. So I get really conflicted about that too. Like, okay, if it's a moment of growth, do I kind of give them insight or my experience? But also, on the same token, it's like, but A, that's not my job. And B, I don't know, maybe somebody else might like that dry personality, or, whatever. Or
right. Maybe somebody else really is also looking for their like spouse and kind of want the, like, I want the, this is going to be an interview because I want to make sure that I'm not wasting my time.
Yeah. So it's like, so I always get really stuck in that too. Cause it's like, well, that, who am I to judge how you should show up in a relationship? It doesn't mean that I'm like, I don't need you to expect to match perfectly with me.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
I always think that one's a tricky one too.
It is. And I also think the length of time matters.
That's fair. I would agree.
I think one date, you're not getting a full picture of someone.
Yeah, no.
I think that maybe after, let's say, a month of getting to know somebody.
That's fair.
I think that would be then, hey, let's say, I know that this might be like a fantastical situation, but let's say both people are like, it's been fun, but I just don't think that we're on the same page.
Yeah.
And then it could be and what kind of feedback would you say, like, for the future of like people to date? And maybe it's like, then there's a bit more of an open conversation about like, I think that you're great, and maybe could expand your curiosities around food, let's say. And so that way it opens up more people to date or whatever. Like, or the other person could be like, yeah, I think that trying more activities might be fun for you. So maybe try and expand that for yourself. And then it might be easier. Like, I think that there can be a beautiful conversation to be had.
Yeah.
I just don't know how many people can like one can in a way that isn't conflictual and hurtful. And two, the other part being that just having it not be exhausting and having it be a quick conversation that then we can both close a chapter and move on.
Yeah. Yes. No, I agree. Because I think sometimes I would agree. I think the longer you date, the more there's more room for that. But I do think it is always, like almost case by case, because I feel like sometimes it's like nothing's wrong. You're just not my person. And I think a lot of times the classic, we want to know why. You know, like, what did I do wrong? Like, what could I have done better? And sometimes it's like nothing. Like, that's just, again, like we said, like, it's just maybe not something I'm interested in. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think, again, we always want to know why. Yeah. So we can fix the problem. And it's like, there's not necessarily always a problem. Sometimes there might be, but.
The movie that you love. He's just not that into you.
Yeah. Yes. God, I love that. I really should rewatch that. If you're listening and you haven't watched it, you should. Early 2000s. He's just not that into you.
Yes.
It's so applicable still.
It's still very applicable.
Nothing has changed.
Nothing has changed. Yeah. Yeah. What is it about that movie that feels so relatable?
I haven't watched it in a while. I'm trying to think. I think I just love how straightforward, blunt, and honest the guy is. I think his name's Alex. I can't think of her. Gigi's her name. And they're, to me, he's a very emotionally unavailable and she's very anxious. So they are, to me, the very like kind of push pull. And so like, I feel like he's really direct with her, telling her how it is. And she is just like the stereotypical hot mess, like, calling, stalking, like, I feel like, again, they're kind of the two tropes a little bit. Like, he's kind of the player. And then it's, to me, the ending is the fake fairy tale that doesn't actually happen, which this is probably the bad part about it, is that, he kind of realizes, oh my God, like, I'm in love with you, blah, 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 blah. And she's kind of, in a sense, I feel like started to move on, like, okay, like, no, I need to go find someone that I deserve. And then he kind of comes back and figures it all out. So I think that's the only bad part that I don't like about it, because I don't think that actually typically happens. I don't think the girl's like, you know what, I'm going to choose myself. I'm going to find, again, someone that's secure and loves me. And then the guy magically is like, oh my God, I had this sudden realization.
Oh
But probably the romantic in me is like, oh my God, it happened.
Of course. Of course. 'Cause, I mean, every rom-com ever has this similar arc, right?
Yep.
Someone is for some reason unavailable.
Yep.
The other person might be like pining for them or something, right?
Mhm.
And there is the rub. There's the one with a high power career. There is the guy who's
Yep.
completely aloof and just like the bartender or whatever.
Yep.
And
Has to say the server somewhere.
right. Just like wants to hook up with women. There's like, there's always just like something that kind of course, because it's a movie. And
Right.
but I think that in real life that those can be applicable, because how often
Yes.
are we kind of looking to date someone and we're like, oh, but if only this had the ending where we overcame the obstacles.
Yep.
And then there's the happy ending.
Yes. AKA we're dating for potential again.
Yep. Exactly.
Like if they fixed this, we'd be great.
Yeah.
And again, to me, that goes back to like, then you are dating the potential. Like that is not always what's in front of you. I always love the question, I think it's the question of, if nothing changes, like not a single thing changes, you still want to be with them. And then it really forces people to look at like like if you are in the moment right now, would you be okay with? And I think that's a tough question for a lot of people.
Oh yeah. Yeah. The other question that I ask sometimes bluntly is it potential or delusion?
Ooh, spicy.
Yes, because you can say this person has potential.
Yeah.
If they've done nothing to say that they're meeting that potential, then it's a delusion, because they haven't shown anything to say they even want that.
Right. Yeah. Like you've just created that. Like, oh, they could maybe do this.
Yeah. Like I see this, but I see this because I want to see it so badly, because I want to be able to make this work. The other person is like, what is it that you're seeing? Why would I even want it? Potentially. And it's like, so is it that it's someone's potential and it's like they're trying, and
have they told you they're working towards this?
Exactly.
I'm going to steal that. I like that. It's a little direct.
It's very direct. And I use it with people who
I have to use it on the right people. Probably.
Right. I use it with people who've been with me for a while and I can joke with, and we've had some banter. And so I'll kind of say it in like a banterish way of like, is it potential or is it a delusion?
Yeah. But I really like that. And I think I have a lot of people that they'd be like, they would hear it and be like, ooh, like, let me think about it. Because I like if you really break it down, it's not trying to be mean. It's just like what you said. Have they given you some of this? So maybe that is potential, that like, okay, maybe there's a little bit more wiggle room, sort of, but the delusion part is like, I think a lot of times it's like, okay, no, they're not doing any active steps towards these things. They could do this, maybe.
Yeah. Hopefully.
This would be a great goal for them.
Yeah.
So like they're going to do it now.
I'll put it on their list.
Yeah. I'll add it to their 2025 resolution list.
Oh man, that's so funny. Since we are in the new year.
Yes.
What if someone is dating, let's say looking for their long-term partner? What do you think are some things that people can do to start dating better?
Oh man, it's tough. I think personally for themselves, I think just like a lot of the things that I see, I think biggest thing is starting with the home within themselves. I think, again, having a good sense of security, that you can enjoy and that you can really do have your own autonomy and independence. I think that's a really good one to start with. And I think if you already have that, then I think trying to kind of what we were talking about earlier of like, having that middle ground, right? Like not being too rigid about things, but not being too fluid too, of just like going too much with the flow, but also not being too set in stone of like, if it's not this, then it's not going to work. So I think a lot of it is trying to really find a lot of the middle ground in some of that. And then I think, again, trying to catch your stuff faster. Because I think a lot of times we, again, let things last for maybe a little too long because we're, again, looking at the potential. We're getting caught in the chemistry, the bid for attentions. So I don't know. I think some of it would maybe just being like trying to be more honest with yourself and what you're looking for, and to see if that actually aligns with like how that's showing up, or even just how you're showing up. Are you engaging in some of those unhealthy things that we're not wanting, or we're, calling out other people for?
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. It's like moving from a place of awareness and
Yes.
knowing what it is that you want, which I think that is a powerful thing.
Mhm.
And that can be in terms of, I think, what people want in life
Yeah.
and what people want as this is who I want to spend my time with,
Mhm.
and this is what would feel good to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything you'd like to add to that list for 2025?
I think if I were to put like one maybe intention for people who are dating,
Mm-hmm.
I think curiosity would be a good intention, and to lean into that a bit maybe more. I think our tolerance for nuance has gone down a lot.
Yeah.
And so
I can see that.
yeah. And so going into it, being curious about who it is that you're dating, being open to whatever those possibilities are, and like seeing what's here versus the is this person meeting the boxes that I have?
Yeah, like writing something off too
Yes.
quickly.
Yeah.
That's fair. Yeah, no, I think that's a good way of looking at it. Cheers to a new year then.
Here's to a new year. Sweet. Anything we haven't covered? Round two?
I don't think so. We did cover some new stuff in this, though.
We did. I think round two may be better than round one.
I think so, possibly too.
Yeah. I'm excited.
No, me too. Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming again, and would love to have you back on.
Absolutely.
Sweet. All right. Take care.
Bye.
Bye, y'all. Till next time.